Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Edith Juguna, and I'm the director of the Success Network. This is the first in our spring webinar series following our conference last month. So the goal of the Success Network is to support communities to increase meaningful and equitable post-secondary attainment, and we do this in a number of ways. We share best practices and foster peer-to-peer learning like we're doing today. We provide technical assistance on a variety of areas like college and career pathways, data, collective impact, and we serve as a conduit for innovation grants. So provide grants to communities to implement their goals, and then we gather and curate critical data to support communities. We are recording the meeting. It will be shared as well as a presentation, and there will be time for Q&A. So we're very fortunate today for today's webinar on building post-secondary and career awareness in middle school to have three people present to us who have a lot of experience and expertise in this area. We're joined by James Elder, Director of Learning and Innovation at Forest Park School District, Rachel Graham, Director of Programs at the Lefkowski Family Foundation, and Anna Moya, Manager, Professional Learning Communities at the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, which is one of the network organizers. And now I will kick it over to you, Anna, to start us off.
Thank you, Edith. Are you all able to hear me? Perfect. So to get started with the background of PACE and sort of like part of the reason of why this is relevant to the middle school world. So a little bit of the background on PACE is that this is sort of like a roadmap that came out of the PWR Act, the Postsecondary Workforce Readiness Act. This was something that was signed into law in July of 2016. It really didn't have much of a mandate for the schools at that point. It was more a mandate or a requirement for the four educational state agencies. So the Illinois Board of Higher Education, ISAC, the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, ICCB, the Illinois Community College Board, and then ISB, the Illinois State Board of Education, so that they would adopt a framework that would outline the work that needed to happen in order for a student to be ready for life after high school. This was something that was adopted. It was implemented by the four state agencies. And then if we move forward to July 2023, it was also updates were made due to legislation that was signed in May 2022, where at the beginning of the creation of PACE, it was focused on high school. And now it is something that has been extended to the lower grade levels. Can you go to the next slide, Edith? So I mentioned that with the beginning of PACE, the mandate, the requirement was on the four educational state agencies. However, this was something that a lot of school districts did see a lot of value on. So from the beginning, ISAC has been supporting the work in PACE. What you have in the screen is a heat map of the districts that are adopting and implementing PACE. This is from spring 2025. We are working on updating this because we have a lot more data now. So we have identified that as of October, there's 276 schools and districts who are implementing PACE. 180 of them have been customized. They customized their own PACE framework. 60 of them adopted the Illinois PACE framework as it is. This is self-reporting data. The requirement is that you are adopting it. So any districts that are serving the grade 6 through 12th grade are required to adopt this. So I do think that there's going to be a lot more data coming out of the schools that are implementing their PACE framework. if you would like to see any of this, we do have all of the frameworks that have been customized up on our website, and the link is on the screen. Next slide, please. For the purpose of the framework, this is going to serve as a tool to guide college and career readiness efforts. It provides sustainability, which means that it'll enable anything that is college and career ready to be replicated from year to year, even if you have the different step turnaround. We all know how that works at school. So this is something that if someone new is coming in, they should be able to pick up wherever they left off, the last person left off. The accountability piece, it'll allow for all staff to understand the expectations for college and career readiness at each grade level. It looks a little bit different in the middle schools than what it does at the high schools, but the high schools do have college and career coaches where everything historically fell into their table that is college and career readiness. So at the middle school, it also opens up that accountability to be for all staff members. And then the flexibility piece, and this is sort of why we're here, because there are a lot of ways to implement and adopt the framework. The implementation piece is actually finding the curriculum, actually finding those activities that you want to be having with the students. There's a lot of flexibility as to what that means for your school. So I'm not going to touch on it because we're talking about the middle school, but this is the Illinois PACE framework. So the Illinois PACE framework is one item as a whole, but we did split it up into two pieces of it. So the Illinois PACE framework high school is going to be one piece of it, and the Illinois PACE framework middle school is the second piece of it. If you can go into the middle school. For the middle school, you will notice that there are different elements, even the colors are different. There are going to be a lot of different elements than what we're focusing on in the high school. So this is going to be sort of the roadmap that you will need in order for you to help your students be able to better interact with the high school framework. These are going to be like fundamentally, what are some things that students can improve on or work on or develop so that once they get into high school, if they have a benchmark or if they have an item that they need to complete, that it's not something that's just a check mark, it'll be something that they can actually be able to connect into like what it means to their future. One of the examples that I say is that if you are having your students, once they're in high school, complete the FAFSA, what did they need to develop at the middle school level in order for them to have the have their understanding of the FAFSA be something that is relevant to their future? Is it something that it's just going to be a graduation requirement, or is it something that they need the fundamentals in order for them to be able to connect the FAFSA to their future and not just a graduation requirement? Next slide, please. Thank you. So the components of the middle school framework are going to be the ones on the screen. So we saw the framework in its entirety, and this is the items that it includes. You'll notice that it has by the end of sixth grade all the way to by the end of eighth grade. Again, we split up the frameworks, and this was also due to being able for no matter what type of district you're in, if you're a unit district, if you are not a district that works seamlessly with one high school, so that you're able to really implement that framework. So by the end of sixth grade, all the way to by the end of the eighth grade. And then you'll see the Venn diagram on the bottom right corner of your screen. This is what we call domains. Really, it's categories. The domains that we have for the middle school are going to be aspiration, self-advocacy, and planning. So all of the items that a student must complete or must be supported to are going to fall within these three categories. And then we have the frameworks, the grade levels are going to be split into a student should be exposed to and a student should be supported to. A student should be exposed to, those are concepts that a student should be able to understand. And then a student should be supported to, these are going to be action items or experiences. The really nice thing about adopting the Illinois PACE framework is that If you are providing your students with experiences, if you are supporting them to do something, the framework aligns really nicely for the understanding concepts to be covered. So technically, you really only have to have or create curriculum or activities for half of the framework. And as you'll see a little bit about even the curriculum from Success Bound, a lot of it is set up so that your student is going through the activity, and one of the outcomes falls within um, one of the categories or domains with the PACE framework. Next slide, please. So, touching more on the categories within the framework, the first one again being aspiration. The goal of this category within every grade level is that students will develop self-awareness and that they will also form an identity consistent with post-secondary success. We often are in meetings where we are mentioning activities that we're having them participate in earlier grades, because you still have an opportunity to develop and create that post-secondary identity or success identity. Um, I do have, but I won't touch on the specific benchmarks that are within each grade level. I'll just touch on the domains. The next one being planning. The goal for this category or domain is that the student will learn the skills necessary to develop and successfully execute a plan for the desired post-secondary outcome. Think about executive functioning. Think about being able to plan for the future. Think about being able to complete those benchmarks. That is going to be more of the planning. Again, if you know that there's deadlines for college, if they are helped to develop this area better, when they get to high school, the benchmarks that are in the framework, they'll be able to already have developed some of the skills that are necessary to succeed in high school. Next slide, please. And then lastly, we have self-advocacy. This is a domain that focuses on building a strong and supportive social network that can help guide them to and through post-secondary education and into a successful career. This is all of the benchmarks that fall within this domain are meant to help them with that. It's meant to help them identify adults that would be their support system, even at the high school level, being able to connect their support system to what is necessary, being able to identify just even asking for help. Those are some of the things that they'll need to work on, and skills that they'll need so that, again, high school, they'll be able to complete the tasks that are needed.
Well, I'll jump in then. Thank you very much, Anna. I appreciate your overview of the PACE framework for everybody. My name is James Edler. I'm the Director of Learning and Innovation for the Forest Park School District 91. And just to give you a brief overview of the district, we are a K-8 district. We have two primary elementary schools with 292 students, one intermediate elementary school, and then one middle school, which is 188 students approximately. Um, at the beginning, I was introduced as having a lot of expertise in this area. I'm going to have to back up a little bit and set the bar a little bit lower on that for you, okay? But maybe that'll make it just a little bit more accessible to just considering on the ground what this means in terms of how we are able to what we've done with the PACE framework, and how we have been working to advance and continue to extend our understanding, as well as to help our students to understand, what's within that PACE framework and how that can help them as individuals as they plan for high school and beyond. But I will tell you that if you could go to the next slide. We are at the very beginning of really understanding the PACE framework and how it connects and really can support student learning. Just a little bit more of an overview of the demographics of our school district. We have 54% is Black or African American, 22% Latino Hispanic, 16% white, and then the rest made up of two or more races or ethnicities, Asian or Pacific Islander. So that just gives you a little bit of a background of, what are the demographics of our school, generally speaking. Next slide, please. So as we began to really look at the PACE framework and in middle school, not sure exactly how many of you are in middle schools and work within a middle school schedule, but we wanted to figure out a way that we could integrate what we were doing in our advisory times. Typically in the past, we had used our advisory time for SEL work primarily. So we used, Second Step as a core resource for SEL. And then in middle school, we also found that we needed to look to some other resources to make some things to find some activities and engage students in learning opportunities that was going to be a little bit more relevant and meaningful for them. So we partnered with Facing History and Ourselves, for example. So we used some advisory time in the past with their curriculum and the curriculum resource that they have. But really, then what we were looking for was a partner and a resource that would help us to both look at what we were doing in supporting our students, like in direct learning around social emotional learning, as well as, of course, integrating that throughout the day. But then also to, see what resources available and how can we connect that with the PACE framework and recognizing the needs of our students as they plan for high school and they plan for beyond high school, whether that's career or college. So, we're in a kind of a unique space, but that advisory time on top of it is only about 25 minutes. So we start really thinking about how do we, really begin to structure our time in the best way possible to address, both of these areas for our students. You can go to the next slide then, please. So what I'd like to share with you now is just an example then of a sixth grade lesson that is taught that really does connect both the CASEL competencies for SEL as well as the Illinois PACE framework. And I'll share that having a learning partner in this is really critical, or certainly was really critical for both myself as well as the team that we had within the middle school, which was the principal. We had two teachers and myself, as well as our partners with Success Bound. We couldn't have done this without Success Bound, and I just really seriously appreciate the opportunity to partner with them, to have a thought partner in not only the details of the planning as in terms of the scope and sequence of the work over the course of the year, but someone to help also look at this, step back and provide a little bit of a bigger picture as we begin to then reflect on how well our implementation went and where we're going to go with this next year. So I would just say that as, again, that partnership and having that partnership with an organization like Success Bound really has helped us to think differently about the PACE framework, help to understand the PACE framework a little bit more deeply, and thinking about how we apply that and then support student learning as it connects to the PACE framework. So in this particular lesson, Organizing My Life, as an example, this would be for sixth graders. And really connects with self-awareness, self-management, as well as social awareness from the CASEL competencies, and then also connects on the Illinois PACE framework, language that emphasizes individual skills, strengths, and assets, as well as develop their confidence in their abilities. So if we can just go to the next slide and just look at this a little bit more. What they do in this lesson essentially is they present students with what do you need to accomplish? What do you need to do over the course of the next week? Just a very easy access point and on-ramp. So asking the students to take all of those things that they needed to do throughout the course of the week and then begin to sort them around what do you really want to do and what do you need to do? What's the difference between wants and needs? So they would sort those into those two categories to begin with. And then what they did after that is they looked at each one of those items that was in each one of those categories and connected it to one of these other areas, whether that was something that was supporting their learning cognitively or something that they needed to do physically. Maybe they wanted to exercise, for example, how what they wanted to do or needed to do supported them in terms of their spiritual aspect, their goals, the visions that they have for the future, and then also emotionally. So they first start off by just sorting it into what do you want to do and what do you need to do. And then they begin to connect that with whether it's a cognitive need or want, a physical need or want, spiritual need or want, or emotional need or want. Lastly, then reflect on having some conversations with one another. What are the other needs of the students and my peers and my friends who are in my classroom in terms of what they're trying to do or what they need to do or want to do over the course of the week, and how they might be able to support them. And then lastly, they identify what do I need to do for myself around these goals? What supports might I need from my classmates, my peers, or my community? So that's just a brief overview of what that lesson is and how that both connects with those CASEL competencies as well as the PACE framework. And then you could go to the next slide, please. So again, we were trying to fit this within that brief amount of time, about 20 to 25 minutes. And what we were able to do is really dedicate that with the support of the guidance counselor to implement those lessons from Success Bound. So we committed to providing students with opportunity for that learning 4 days a week during that advisory time. And as we started to then look back and we were tracking how many lessons and where were they in that completion, we had about, on average, about 82% of our students who have completed all of those lessons from the beginning of the year up to now. So there was, certainly were some gaps throughout the year when that wasn't being taught, but really feeling pretty good about that average completion rate as it was really our first year in working on this. Now, within Success Bound, those lessons, for example, typically are about 60 minutes, but what we did is we split those up over the course of 20-minute, 25-minute time slots. Okay. So that made that a little bit more manageable and fit into that structured time. But again, that having that short amount of time, you know how it is. You're not always starting at 8:05 because you've got some kids coming in or you're bringing kids in from the hallway or whatever that transition may look like. So sometimes there's a little bit of a delayed start and then getting the students settled and ready and in a mind frame where they're ready to begin that learning. So that structure in and of itself can certainly be challenging, and we are looking at what are some other ways that we can design our schedule so that we could accommodate more dedicated time toward both SEL directly as well as that PACE framework. Go to the next slide, please. So just to think a little bit about our implementation plan, just a very broad overview of that. We did, as I indicated, we had that local implementation team, and we did use a train the trainer model. So we had Erica from Success Bound who came in and provide that training for us as that local team. And then throughout the course of the year, Success Bound helped us to do some pulse checks and some implementation surveys with the teachers to see how things were going and what supports they needed. And again, I mentioned we had that local lesson tracker, and there were some optional office hours, but really, when I needed something, I reached out to our partners at Success Bound, and they were there. The support that they provided us really was an amazing customer service, and they were very quick to reply, and just a really excellent partner in that way. And then on the other side, in terms of looking at the supports that we provided for teachers at the school level, We provided like an initial overview at the beginning of the year, and then there was a unit overview at the start of each quarter. So we looked at each one of those units that was coming up within that quarter and did an overview of the units that they might be addressing during that quarter. We did have weekly planning time, particularly in the beginning when they were able to reflect on the success-bound lessons and how those were going and how they were planning, teachers were planning in terms of teaching those lessons. And again, just ongoing regular communication with our success-bound site director. Just looking back over the course of this first year, I can tell you that our teachers, for the most part, did feel supported throughout that implementation. And I think one of the biggest successes was the level to which that they were reporting that their students were engaged in those activities. So the students really found the activities meaningful and relevant. Teachers were also able to make some connections to some of the content in some of their content areas. So, for example, I happened to be in an eighth grade mathematics classroom, and they were looking at a scatter plot. And as they were looking at the scatter plot, I overheard the teacher say, "Remember, we were talking about some careers, in Success Bound yesterday. What types of careers do you think might use a scatter plot and the data that's on the scatter plot?" So it was really satisfying just to hear that kind of connection when they were, that just kind of naturally occurred in their conversation and how he was connecting that mathematics with their learning from Success Bound and that PACE framework. So the other thing that I would say that was a really great success about SuccessBound and talking to the guidance counselor is they had both the career interest survey as well as career exploration in that same platform. So it wasn't like he had to do a separate interest survey and then bring in other resources around career explorations. So that I think that's one of the nice features about SuccessBound is that both of those are within that resource. Challenges, as I mentioned, that structured time. Advisory simply is too short. Other challenges that we had was some of the accommodations for our students with diverse learning needs. At times, the lessons were very wordy. They were really asking maybe for some more videos and that kind of thing that would maybe provide a little bit more access for some of the students with diverse learning needs, especially some of those students that are we do have a structured classroom, one structured middle school classroom, and they did have some challenges in terms of keeping up the pace with the rest of their peers on that. And the other area that I think we did have some challenges was the integration with Google Classroom. So we were trying to take those lessons and then split them up over 3 different lessons. And then that just became a little bit tricky in terms of what that looks like in Google Classroom and how we were able to integrate it that way. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Rachel to connect then a little bit more about the implementation models. As we were thinking about our implementation model using that advisory time, and as I mentioned earlier, I think just the opportunity to be working in partnership with SuccessBound, thinking about that implementation really provides that impetus then to go back and really look at our schedules and make some adjustments because we recognize that this learning is critical for our students, engaging for them, and really creates lots of different on-ramps and areas where we can make other connections with their content and their learning.
Thank you, James. Yeah, hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Graham with the Lefkowski Family Foundation and SuccessBound. It's nice to see everybody today. So it's been great working with James and the Forest Park team this year. And I think when we start having these conversations with people about how do I integrate the PACE framework into my school day, how do I build time for this? I think a lot of the questions are always the big questions that we see is like, when does this fit and who leads this work? I think those are two big questions that we tend to come across and hear from some of the schools that are working to integrate some of this. So I know that there's a lot of you on here that have probably done this work also. So feel free to drop in the chat if you have ways that you have seen your school or your schools in your district, your partners implement some of this work. But what we see is I think as James was talking about is really having an implementation team, right? But somebody on that team who's really the champion or the leader, right? This person that is the accountability manager, for lack of a better word, that is really making sure that everybody on the team is doing their different pieces and their different parts to build this up. So we see that as a lot of times a school counselor will maybe take on and lead this work, or a teacher who's really passionate about leading this, or potentially an assistant principal. So somebody who has both like the passion around this work, but then also the job alignment and potentially a little bit of time to be able to lead the accountability. But what's really important is that they're working within that school team to make sure that everybody is doing this work together. So you can see some of that natural connection points that James mentioned about how they're talking about careers in the classroom or in the PACE framework time, and then seeing that transition into curricular activity. And so we've seen it taught in a number of different ways, or kind of we've seen it happen in an advisory period, like James mentioned. And I think there's always an arc to this, right? Like James and his team at Forest Park Middle School have realized over the year that they really would benefit from a longer block of time to be able to dive into more deep conversations around the work that they're doing. But when they were starting out, they needed to fit it into a structure or a place where the teachers would buy in and everyone would see this is a time that we have available. And then through the work, they've seen the need to move that into a 45, 60-minute block of time. So sometimes it's understanding where your staff is and where you need to start, but with the end goal of really having some dedicated time to be able to dive into these conversations more deeply. So we see it oftentimes as a solo block of 45 minutes. So sometimes I've seen schools that are doing that in like an MTSS block if they have that on every day. Or we've seen schools where they kind of will shorten some of the classes by 5 minutes every day on a Wednesday. And so then on that day, then they have a 45, 60-minute block of time to do that. We've also seen it integrated into academic lessons. Are there pieces here that can fit really nicely into an art class? We're doing a vision board that could be done in art, or we're diving into connecting and learning about GPA that could fit into math. So just some examples around that. We've also seen this done a little bit and sometimes in small counseling lessons, where the counselor is dedicated to like a group of, 7 to 8 students that needed to work a little bit more on attendance or things of that nature. So on the next slide, what I'm going to do, so I wanted to kind of dive into one of these activities a little bit. So we didn't want to just talk to you. We wanted to actually hear from you as well. So this is a sample activity. And this activity is the opening activity to a goal setting lesson, helping young people understand why they're setting goals and what that looks like. So the start of this is, oh my goodness, we had an anonymous and very generous donor give us some money to go on a class trip, but we need to plan out the trip ourselves. What steps do we need to take to make sure we have a good time? So first we would have a discussion with the students about like, what is our goal here? What are we trying to accomplish? We don't have to have that discussion, but what that would be, right, it would come to, we want to have the best trip ever, right? We all want to have fun. We all want to be able to go and we want to have a great time. So then I would put up a big chart paper on the wall and have students start just on Post-its, put together what are some of the activities, what are action steps that we would have to do to have a good time. So why don't we take a minute? Let's all do this together. And in the chat, what is one step you believe you have to take in order to have a good trip? So I'll give everyone just a minute and drop something in the chat about what would be that action step you think is important to take. Yes, pick our destination, plan the tentative itinerary, know your budget, check the weather, plan transportation. Identify budget, transportation, find out if everyone's interested, vote everyone's interested. So like a little interest inventory, the length of the trip. All of these are really, really good points. So thank you for taking that time and doing that. And so then what we would do then is we would break the group up into small groups and we would start to look at what's short term here? What are things we have to decide today? What are things that we have to decide somewhere in the middle, or we have to do in the middle of before we go on the trip? And what are the things that are more of our long-term goals, the things that need to happen right at the end, right? And so we would start then having the discussion that those checklists items often build on each other. And sometimes it's best to split them up into like, if I do this first, then I can work on the next step and then work on the next step. And so then I would lead that discussion into how does planning a trip look the same as setting goals for what you want to accomplish in our class or what you want to accomplish in terms of your post-secondary, and then start building and adding and developing some of those goals from there. So that's just an example of one way to start to bring kids into that discussion and activity. Thank you, Claretta. We like it too. Okay, let's go on to the next slide really quick. But so my question, the next slide, great. So I want to hear from some of you. How do you see an activity like this, and then the broader goal setting lesson? So the lesson then continues on to helping students build a goal, set a short-term, mid-term, long-term goal as it relates to school or their post-secondary aspirations. So my question for you, feel free to jump off mute or just drop it in the chat. How do you see this lesson aligned to the PACE framework? Planning skills. Thank you, Alex. Great. Okay, and then what we wanted to have another discussion around is, so like as Paula mentioned in the chat, how she's doing this in Peoria Public Schools, where students are coming together doing lunch and learns and running some of these lessons and activities across students there. What are some other activities or some other examples of how you maybe have framed up a goal setting lesson as it relates to building post-secondary readiness? Maybe a little discussion or other things that you all have done to start implementing PACE.
Maybe I can just help to kind of get started a little bit here, but
Great, thanks.
If you think about this activity as kind of a metaphor for what students might need to do as they are beginning to think about if my decision is to pursue some higher education after high school, for example. Well, what is that budget that I'm going to need to have? How much money is that going to cost, right? And then I start to back that up. What do I need to do, from now until then, and building toward that goal? What do I need to do just around not only, maybe securing the financial supports that are necessary, but then also what do I need to do academically? What do I need to do personally? And how do I begin to set some short-term goals and make some connections with that long-term goal that I have? And that can be challenging when we think about our students, for example, setting some of those long-term goals. Although I will mention that we provided a baseline survey for our students at the beginning of the year, and one of those was about one of those items, or we were collecting some data, was their perceptions of the skills that they had when it comes to being able to set goals, for example. And there was a pretty big discrepancy between how our students perceived their capacity to do that compared to what their teachers believed was their capacity to do that. So that in and of itself, I think, was very insightful for teachers, and helps to give some insights into their perspective, for example, around their capacity to do some long-term goal setting. And that example of that lesson, where I think it's very engaging because it's relevant and they can connect with that really easily. You can then take that as an example and apply that to, for example, setting some goals, some longer term goals for students in terms of their academic goals or their career aspirations.
Hi, this is Trish O'Shaughnessy. I'm the one from Peoria Public Schools Foundation, and I'll share. Peoria Public Schools and the Peoria Public Schools Foundation has been working around middle school and high school career exploration for quite a while. I mentioned that our program one of the programs that we run through the foundation is called Horizons Club. It is a lunch and learn. We have 12 middle schools in the district. We have approximately 800 students in the program every year. And we do a lot of the same things that you are doing in your advisory times. We do a lot of individual exploration on self skills and self interest. We couple that with exploration on industries and careers, and bring in quite a few. We have a speaker series. So about twice a month, the children will have a guest speaker from our community will come in and share their career story with them. We try to bring in a diverse group of careers. I also work closely with the counselors in our building. So we're not working in a silo with this program, but our counselors are enforcing some of the skills that they're learning through Horizons Club in their classrooms with their teachers. We, like you, work in alignment with social and emotional curriculum. So ours is called 7 Mindsets. And actually, that's a newer curriculum. I've been doing this program much longer than 7 Mindsets has been in the district, but we've been doing a lot of alignment through that. That's where a lot of our goal setting comes in, with various goal setting activities. They also are getting goal setting in their classrooms as well through their teachers. So we try to make sure everything is on the same page district wide. And then they're getting the same terminology in a pre-K to 5th grade program we run as well as our high school programming. So we are a pre-K 12 district. So we would like all of our terms, our lesson plans at an age appropriate level to align across the district so that children don't think they're relearning something or that it's a new content, even though it's the same. So we do a lot of career fairs for the middle school kids. There's the counselors like to do where they pick a career and come dressed as the career for that day. So there's quite a lot of activity around our middle schools trying to work with the PACE framework, but done at a building level. Mine's a district-wide level.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all those different examples. Does anyone else want to share an example of how they've integrated something like goal setting into their program? Or we also can open up to questions for either Anna, James, or myself. And Erica from our team, Success Fund, is also here.
Well, folks come up with questions. I do have one for you. And, you've talked a little bit about this, but I'm wondering if you could talk about what conditions need to be in place to ensure successful implementation of this work.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Edith. And I think some of the things we started talking about this, I think it's really important that there's buy-in and alignment at the admin level, right? So that this doesn't feel like it's something additional, but that it directly connects to the things and the goals that the school has moving forward. I think a spot, right? Like a dedicated time for this work to live, and a team that is going to kind of be the accountability to ensure that implementation of that moves forward. I also think what was really interesting what James mentioned is that that they did a pre-survey and really noticed there's a difference in perception of what students already know or what their aspirations are, what their skills are, and what the teachers understood. And so I think having an understanding of that and working through all of this, that this is kind of something that we're doing in tandem to build the awareness of the students, but there's also the piece of ensuring that the adults that are working with the students believe and help kind of move that forward, that students can really be anything that they want to be. And middle school is a perfect time for that exploration. So you might not always have that buy-in of understanding why this work is important from the whole staff at the beginning of the year, but working towards that is really important to understand why the middle school brain is primed to be having these activities and these types of discussions. So while I would say it's probably a strong condition for it to be really successful, I don't know that it has to, ideally will always be there at the beginning versus something that is continued throughout.
I would add to that the value of the learning for students and giving teachers an opportunity to, first of all, recognize that we're learning this together. They don't have to get it, perfectly or exacted, when they begin. This is can be a lot of fun and enjoyable with students. And when they look at, a resource that has those types of activities that Rachel and I have referenced from Success Bound, and then also recognize that they're going to be given opportunity to do some planning around it. They have to have that time and to be supported where they can look at that, talk to their colleagues about, how their colleagues are teaching lessons within their classroom, for example, and then also having the continued ongoing partnership with organization like Success Bound, where they can come back in and work with not only the district folks, but then also with our teachers, and teachers recognizing that they're going to be supported as they're trying some of these, trying something that was new for them, for example, this year. And I'll tell you, if they didn't feel supported and they didn't feel like it was meaningful and relevant for their students, we would not have seen even close to an 82% completion rate around those lessons that were made available to them. So I think those are some of those conditions, though, that led to a pretty strong implementation over the course of this past year with our middle school.
A question came in, Edith. What collaboration is had with your high school district? How necessary is collaboration? I've worked a lot with high schools in implementing PACE. And just to tell you from my experience, it is extremely crucial that there is collaboration. I have worked with unit districts that there's a great relationship with the middle school and the high school, and the team loves each other. However, asking the question of like, are you sharing the data, right? You're telling us that you're doing all of these career exploration activities at the middle school level, at the high school level. How are you utilizing that data to drive your programming, your curriculum, the pathway endorsements that you offer for your students? And it has been, we really have not shared data. So as much as you do, if we're talking about career exploration at the middle school level, you can do a ton of activities, but if it doesn't carry over, if they're starting over at the high school level, then you're missing an opportunity for the students to be able to work towards the goal, and they're starting over. So that piece of like just collaborating, communicating, it's going to be really important. I'm not sure if anybody else has anything else.
Yeah, I could add, and I do think in an ideal world, collaboration happening between middle school and high school around what those pathways are and how to continue that work is ideal. I also think in the middle grade space, it's so much about exploration and trying to understand and like not being pitted in any pathway. So I think it's really important to have like real open collaboration and understanding of your own, student strengths and areas of interest. So having that happen, I think is really important to be as kind of free from set pathways as possible. So students can really be open and exploring a lot anything. But I do think it's important to share that work with the high school of what has happened so that it can continue and grow in that way. I think it's also, some of that transition from 8th to ninth grade is really helpful to prepare for. So understanding we have some lessons that we've worked with schools on in Success Found around with 8th graders that is around like imagining what your perfect high school experience would look like. And perfect is not the right word, like an ideal high school experience would look like. How would you craft and develop a club? What would you do to learn about your interests and what happens in the school? How do you ask for help and some of that self-advocacy thing? So if they go into a space that is different than their elementary school, how are they able to advocate for their educational needs? I also think it's important to like have 8th graders look at a high school transcript when they're in 8th grade to understand what does that mean? What are the credits? How are those building upon? And how do I know if I'm on track based on what we just did with learning GPA and learning goal setting? So I think, yes, to Anna's point, it is really helpful to have a strong collaboration so you're not starting over. But I also think it's really important. And I think there are things that you can be doing even if that collaboration isn't strong to help prepare them for when they get there, to advocate for all the things that you've been doing and learning about in the middle grade space as they transition over. And to ensure that the middle grade space stays really open and explorative and not directive into specific pathways.
I love that, Rachel. And I will say also, I talked about a unit district. I think one of the biggest challenges is going to be collaboration if you are in a district that is not a unit district. That is going to be one of the biggest challenges, just so that you are able to prepare for it.
Well, we're just at the beginning of this. So again, this was an excellent experience for us. We have had some opportunities to collaborate with the high school in some other areas. Haven't really dug into too much in terms of the connections that they can make between that PACE framework. But this was really our first year where we were able to really make some gains in terms of student learning around PACE framework. And I think as we go back and we're feeling more confident about, the learning that we are able to provide with our students from 6th through 8th grade, and we get into next year, some of those conversations, then we're positioned in a better place to really explore those connections from middle school into high school. But again, I'll just share with you, like we're very early in this work. So, we're open to that and looking forward to that, but can't have that conversation until we really we're digging into this ourselves.
They asked me if I can. They said, you mentioned something about half the middle school framework. Could you further explain that? So when I talked about the middle school framework being like, if you are completing half of it, then the other half is technically complete. It's that the framework, every grade level is split into a student should be supported to, and a student should know, which would be like the outcome of that activity. So a student should be supported to. Those are going to be activities that essentially the school would provide opportunities to participate in an activity. Those activities being that the outcome of it would be the items that would be under a student should know. So again, if you're already completing half of the framework with your students, then the other half is something that would, if done right, be completed as well, because the outcome of the activity would be that they would know certain concepts.
Thank you, Rachel, James, and Anna, for this really informative presentation. I loved the very practical examples that you gave about how others can implement this in their districts, and also appreciate the high-level work about the PACE framework from a state perspective. Thank you again for joining us.